Tim Harford, also known as the Undercover Economist, has pulled all of his money out of the stock market since the start of the pandemic. In this video, I'm taking a look at why Harford has taken his chips off the table and what else he has to say about money management. By the end of this video, you'll discover the real reason why the Undercover Economist has pulled out of his stock market investments in the last year, the right level of engagement to have with your investments, and what I think is a fantastic philosophy about money and happiness. So keep on watching for that. Hi everyone, I'm Bamford, a chartered financial planner, personal finance YouTuber and money author. On this channel, I talk about personal finance, investing and happiness. I make these videos to help you become wealthier and happier. And if that sounds like a great result, click on that little red subscribe button, become a part of our subscriber community. It's completely free and you'll never miss an episode. If you've not come across Tim Harford before, he's an economist, journalist and broadcaster. His big break was the publication of The Undercover Economist. It sold more than 1 million copies. He's also a senior columnist for the Financial Times and he presents More or Less on BBC Radio 4. His new book is called How to Make the World Add Up. Tim was made an OBE for services to improving economic understanding back in the New Year's Honours of 2019. And now, according to an interview with The Telegraph, he's pulled all of his money from the stock market. Let's take a look together at some of the key elements from this interview, which I'll link to in the description, and what his answers tell us about how the Undercover Economist manages his money. The interview starts by looking at how his childhood influences his attitude towards money. He talks about his parents being careful with money without being absurdly frugal. He said, "We would go on holiday once a year. There was a certain amount of privilege, but not a lot." Many of our attitudes towards money are shaped by our childhood experiences. We just might not realise it. It is an extremely healthy exercise to think back to your childhood and some of your earliest money memories to start to understand how they are influencing your views of money today. Some of those earliest childhood memories and experiences can create very healthy attitudes towards money and some less so. Key to this is recognising what's serving you and being able to reshape attitudes that are negative. The interview with Tim Harford goes on to say that he had a paper round as a child. Me too. I think this is key to shaping a work ethic, and I'm genuinely concerned that so few teenagers today seem to have Saturday jobs, seem to have paper rounds. Instead, their parents choose to fund their lifestyles so the kids can focus on their studies, and I hear about this time and time again. Earning some pocket money as a kid is such a valuable life experience. In my teens, I delivered newspapers, I washed up dishes in a French restaurant, I worked on the tills and in the kitchen at our local garden centre. It meant that I could save up enough money to buy my first car, a rather sorry little Renault 5 Campus, but most importantly it taught me about the value of hard work. Delivering newspapers early in the morning in all weather, that can be a fairly miserable experience. Washing up dishes in a French restaurant and working for a slightly psychotic French chef, sorry Jean-Pierre, and ending up with sore hands as a result, that was definitely miserable, definitely a pretty miserable experience, but really good money at the time. And working throughout the summer months in a greenhouse, that wasn't much fun either. But I've grown up without the fear of hard work. Parents, for all that is good, please send your kids out to do some work during their teenage years. Send them out to get their hands dirty. They can balance their studies with a Saturday job or an early morning paper round. We all used to do it when we were kids. They can do it today as well. Back to the interview. On becoming an economist, Harford explains that he fell into the profession. He applied to study PPE, that's philosophy, politics and economics, what he refers to as a course being quite famous for people who don't know what they want to do. It's okay not to know what you want to do. Asking 17-year-olds to pick a career via their university course choice is utter madness. Far more important than focusing on the degree you need for a specific career is learning a variety of skills, and I think most importantly, the ability to learn. Success comes from lifelong learning, not accidentally picking the right university course and then falling into the right career path. Harford's big break, as I mentioned at the top of the video, was the publication of his book, The Undercover Economist, back in 2005. The timing of this book publication was fortuitous. Never underestimate the importance of lucky timing. The Undercover Economist came out after the success of another book about popular economics called Freakonomics, and it came out before the global financial crisis. It landed at the right time. He explains in the interview that the book was a springboard for his FT column and then presenting opportunities with the BBC. We undervalue springboards. Success builds on success. It rarely comes from a single event. If you have a lucky break, That's the start of a journey, not its end. Build on that success, keep on going, maintain momentum. Now we get to the nub of the interview, his interest in money. The interviewer asked Harford, "Are you interested in money?" And he said no, he's not super interested in money, but he says he's reasonably engaged in his own finances and investments. That's a good level of engagement. You would have heard me saying before in these videos that if investing is your hobby, you need to get a new hobby. You want to be engaged enough with money, but not too engaged. Don't make it the be-all and end-all of your life. Don't become a full-time financial planner unless that's your career ambition, of course. Harford goes on to make an excellent point, which is this: economics is not really about money. Instead, it's about the decisions people make, it's about history, it's about power structures. He says that economists are often criticised for not thinking enough about money. And I think we make this mistake all too often of believing that economics is all about personal finances, about investment markets, when really it isn't. The interview goes on to ask Harford if he's ever worried about paying the bills, and he says he's been very lucky. He doesn't think he has. He's got one example of a bill he wasn't able to pay straight away, and that's when he started his first postgraduate job as a management consultant, and it was a tax bill. It was a tax bill for £3,000 and he only had a fortnight to pay it. Unexpected tax bills are an absolute tripwire for so many people financially, especially for self-employed people who don't tend to put money away for their future tax bills as they earn each and every pound. There's only two things that are certain in this life: death and taxes. Please make sure you put money away to one side to pay for your tax bill. Those tax bills will keep coming. And then Harford goes on to explain that the onset of the pandemic was a huge shock to his finances. It seems to have hit him particularly hard because one of his key sources of income was speaking about economics. Speaking engagements are well paid. I've done a few of them in my time as well, probably not paid anywhere near as much as Tim Harford is. But of course, when the pandemic started, speaking opportunities dried up more or less overnight. However, Harford explains that he had savings to cover that shock to his finances. As financial planners, we talk all of the time about the importance of a cash emergency fund. Nobody knows when the next shock to our personal finances will come along. That might be another pandemic. It might just be a broader economic crash. Those do tend to come in cycles. Or it might be something very personal to you, the loss of a job, suffering an illness, for example. Something that knocks your money situation for six. Having cash saved up in a savings account to cover your expenditure when those emergencies arise, that is incredibly important. And then we move on to the headline which grabbed my attention initially about Harford pulling all of his money out of the stock market. The interviewer asked Harford, "Where will you be putting your money over the next 2 years?" And that's when he dropped this bombshell that he's pulled all of his money from the stock market. However, it's not because he's lost confidence in the stock markets, it's not because he thinks they're overvalued and about to crash, it's because he needs the money to cope with the interruption to his paid work. So he had money in the stock market, he had income from speaking engagements, the income dried up, and therefore he had to sell his stock market investments to cover his lost income. I think there's an important lesson to learn from this. In an ideal world, your emergency fund should not be invested in the stock market. It should be in cash. Now, arguably, Harford has been very fortunate here because at the time he was forced to sell his stock market investments, the markets were riding high. But what would have happened if he'd found himself in the same position of his income drying up because of the pandemic, because of an economic shock, but the markets at that time had crashed significantly? He would have been forced to sell his stock market investments at a time when markets were much lower, maybe even taking a big loss. The stock market investments Harford has sold, he has put into an offset mortgage account. That's effectively giving him a 2% tax-free return. And in the current low interest rate environment, that's a pretty good return. If you have a mortgage, then the ability to have an offset account, where you offset your cash savings against the amount you owe to your mortgage lender, that can give you a very attractive tax-free return. Harford goes on to explain his plan for when his earnings pick up again, and his plan is to drip feed that money back into his ISAs because it gives him that tax wrapper, protecting the return, protecting the income and the capital gains from tax in the future. Harford also tells us that he's a fan of low-cost passive investing and diversified global tracker funds. I'm yet to meet an economist who thinks of themselves as a trader, as a stock picker. This approach of accessing the entire stock market through a low-cost index tracking fund, but also making sure that it's diversified across different markets, different countries, that's a really sensible way to go when it comes to investing money. There's a key quote from Harford in this interview. He says, "I know enough about the stock market to know that I know less than people who do this for a living. I'm just happy to be in the market rather than trying to do better than the market." That's a fantastic philosophy and it's a fantastic belief system. When it comes to investing money, Deep down, we should all be happy if we do what the market does. This obsession we so often see with trying to do better than the market, trying to generate what's known as alpha, it is unhealthy, and in many cases it's entirely unnecessary. The interview wraps up with Harford being asked if he would change anything about his finances. He says he keeps things under review. He has a financial advisor, and that may well surprise some people that an economist, someone with the status and expertise of someone like Tim Harford, has his own financial advisor. Look, I come across plenty of financial advisors who have their own financial advisors or their own financial planners. Even if the only benefit of working with a financial planner is behavioral coaching, helping you to make better decisions with your money, helping you to avoid making big investing mistakes, that's a price worth paid. You'll get value for money by doing that. So even for people who know an awful lot about money, about the technicalities of investments, who know an awful lot about investing money, there is still an advantage of working with a financial planner. Harford talks in the interview about the sorts of mistakes that people usually make with money, and that's a good question to ask Tim Harford because, as he explained right at the start of the interview, economics is all about the behaviour of people, more than it is about money itself. He says that the two of the most common mistakes are short-term debts and paying too much for specific insurance that you don't really need on products. We get this all the time. When we go and buy an electronics product, for example, in the shop, the salesperson will offer us an add-on insurance policy, and Harford says in this interview that most people have got too much mobile phone insurance and too little critical illness insurance. So we're paying too much for insurances we don't really need and too little for insurances that we do really need. When it comes to insurance, I think it's really important to prioritise the different risks. The risks we face are likely to be very similar, but how much importance we attach to those different risks, for example, the risk of dying and the financial impact on our family, the priorities will be very different. Harford is asked about the best thing he's ever bought, and he says it's the house he lives in and that his wife helped design it with the help of an amazing architect. They've lived there for almost a decade. He said it's the most expensive thing I've ever bought. It was a huge project. But he's very happy, very, very happy that he spent the money and bought that property. And then the final question in the interview, I think is an absolute kicker. Does money make you happy? I'll read word for word what Harford said. Money in itself doesn't make me happy, but it allows me to make things that would make me unhappy and stressed go away. I think that's a fantastic point to end the interview on. There is a connection between money and happiness, but thinking of it like this, thinking a bit about how we use money to reduce stresses in life, to reduce potential points of unhappiness, I think that's a really healthy way of looking at it. Don't necessarily go out there thinking, how do I spend my money to make me happier? But you can go out there and think, how do I spend my money to make me less unhappy or make me less stressed? What can you spend money on that takes away some of the stress points in your life? A brilliant interview with Tim Harford in The Telegraph. I'll put a link to the interview itself in the description of this video. What did you take away from his interview answers? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, I'm Martin Bamford, and remember, when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.